now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. Oh, my mind, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. You got control of me, break my barricades. Walls are crumbling, grounds they shake. You came to save, but it's way too late. Every single time you stay, I cave.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodivergent News, where we are redefining what it means to be neurodivergent. Neurodivergent just means different. It does not mean damaged. And once you figure out what your superpower is, you are off like a rocket. I am Deanna Brakefield, your host and the owner of Lionheart Kingdom Marketing. I am a mom of 7 wonderful children, 6 of whom are neurodivergent. And we are still looking for some of the blessings with my sweet babies. My husband also has Asperger's, and I have ADHD, as many of you know. Today, I have with me the wonderful Shaye. Now, Shaye is the only lady that I know that has more children than I do, and just as interesting a composition of a household. And I'm just tickled pink to have her with me today. And you guys can't see it, but she's wearing a pink shirt, so it just fits. And my energy is insane today. So hopefully you guys can follow along with this wild roller coaster we're about to go on to. So Shaye, welcome.
Thank you so much. I sure appreciate you allowing me to talk on your show and be able to share a lot of what I've learned.
Absolutely. So Shaye, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Well, I have a business that I coach people with ADHD because a lot of us are dealing with that overwhelm, the anxiety, the stress, oh my gosh, I forgot, or oh my gosh, I didn't get it done. And just helping them to realize how they can process with their own brain. Because, like you said at the beginning, neurodivergent doesn't mean anything but being different. So our processes are different. So why are we trying to do it the quote unquote normal way? So it's just helping them to be able to find their ways of doing it. And there's actually gifts within our ADHD. So that's what I mainly do. And I work with a lot of people that are doing businesses and helping them to be able to kind of figure out those steps because sometimes it can be just a lot.
So when we were chatting before, when I had the pleasure of getting to know you, we talked a little bit about your family and we talked a little bit about yourself and your own late diagnosis.
Right. We are a blended family of 9 kids. So my husband has 4, I have 5, and they all have varying degrees of ADHD. And I believe personally that we all carry a little bit of characteristics of all the different types of things. And so when we got together, it was very loud. It was very excited and a lot going on. Myself, I wasn't diagnosed till I was in my 30s or 40s. I can't remember for sure, but it was a late diagnosis. So I've been dealing with this all my life. And then I got a nice, good, swift kick in the pants about 3 years ago when I had a percussive concussion and it like 10 times my ADHD. So what I thought was working, now I had to start all over again. So for people that don't know what a percussive concussion is, that's when you don't necessarily hit your head, but your brain still moves inside of your skull, and so it gets the concussion that way.
It's absolutely horrible. I mean, it must have been difficult trying to relearn how to cope and have new symptoms on top of everything.
It was difficult. It's really interesting how concussions are. So I didn't even know I had the concussion for probably about a week or maybe even a little bit longer. And so what happens is because of the sloshing around of our brain inside of our skull, there were some things that just, I don't want to say damaged. It's not that they were damaged, bruised. They were hit. And then it ended up being that I didn't realize it until the symptoms started stacking up of being, really irritable and cranky and very short-tempered. And that's when we found out was about a week and a half later. But dealing with having to relearn everything all over again and being able to function, it was really tough. I mean, it wasn't super, super bad. Like I didn't have a major TBI, but I did have what's called a mild, excuse me, a mild TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury, is what they call concussions now. So it wasn't that I couldn't function, but I couldn't function my normal way. So
Right.
now I have to learn a new normal.
A new normal on top of an old normal that wasn't
Right.
normal to begin with.
Exactly. Let's have a party.
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, you appear to have gotten past that at this point.
Actually, that's the funny thing about it. We all have appearance on the outside and we all look a certain way, and so people think everything's fine. But the reality is when you're dealing with ADHD, it's kind of hidden because it's inside your head. It's not like a cast on a broken arm or a broken leg where somebody can see you and be like, "Oh, you broke it. You're healing. You're moving forward." Whereas when it's within your brain, nobody can see it. They only see the outward. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of that struggle, that internal struggle that, yeah, I look great. Yeah, I can do things, but there still is the reciprocal things that have happened, such as, too much overstimulus or emotional dysregulation, which we all know about that, don't we? And then on top of it, dealing with, well, you should be able to do it. You used to do it before. Why can't you do it now? So it's kind of something that's continuing on, but it's also something that you do heal from and move forward. You just have a new normal. It's not the same as it was before.
Getting a little personal, how has it affected your relationship with your husband and children?
That one is a really touchy issue because it's very close to my heart. That's actually how they figured out that I had a concussion is because we had a son and daughter-in-law living with us at the time, and they went to my husband and they're like, she's really ornery. She's just being kind of mean. And that was very outside of my norm. And so the relationships are still there, but there are moments where it's really tough because if I say I can't come to that because it's just too much, it's going to cause the migraine, or that's just too loud. The grandkids being all over at once is too much. So it's pulled me away from some of my relationships in aspects that I never wish I had. But it also has brought my husband and I closer because now he understands me and I understand him as we've worked on this really, really, you know, in depth. And on top of it, creating the coaching world for me to be able to step into and help those out there. So as far as relationships with family, it's a struggle sometimes. As far as relationship with friends, it's a struggle because you can't always do what you used to do.
Mhm.
And so it can pull away or it can bring you closer. Just depends on the people you're working with.
So you touched on your coaching business. Is
Mhm.
that post injury or did you begin that before?
I began that before, but I wasn't really using it as a business. It was kind of more, as some people jokingly say, that was your hobby. Because I would help a lot of people, but I wasn't using it as a business. Once I had the concussion and there was real repercussions from it, I no longer could do the job that I had. I started looking at it as a business of something that I can do that I have flexibility in and can work with my brain. And so that I can be able not only to work with the limitations, I guess, if that's a word you want to use, that I have, but also to be able to help other people that are struggling through the same thing. Because honestly, not many people are out there really helping people with ADHD because they either don't understand it, don't realize that they have it, or they just don't know the skills or tools to help someone.
So what sort of tools do you bring to the table when you're helping a client?
Well, a lot of it starts with their beliefs. How many of us have grown up thinking, well, we're different, so there's something wrong with us?
Mhm.
Starting there is a really good point to begin because at that point, then you realize that, hey, maybe I'm not broken. Maybe there is something that I can do. Some of the tools is helping them realize that, hey, you don't go in this direction. You go in this direction, where it's not a straight line, it's a squiggly line where you go off to the right and off to the left, and you have all these different things and experiences, and that's okay. So I work with their beliefs. I work with the processes and symptoms that are systems that they already are using, find out what works for them and what doesn't work. And then we create what they need for the things that they're doing. If they're in a job that has details and specifics and deadlines and they're not meeting those, why not? And what can we do to help you move forward? And it's the same when you're working with kids, especially when they're dealing with deadlines and homework and, all the things that they've got to deal with too. So it's along the same line of just giving them the understanding that, hey, let's start at point A. Let's take our little trail all over the place and see where you're at, and we'll get to point B eventually. We don't need to run a straight line like everyone else does.
So, do you find it is easier or more difficult to work with neurodivergent clients, yourself being neurodivergent?
Actually, I find it quite fun. Probably because each one, and this is something that I've learned, each one of us as a neurodivergent do not mimic the other person. Each one of us are individual.
Mhm.
We have similarities in things that we deal with, but that doesn't mean that we're all going to be the same. We're all going to do it the same. We're all going to be fixed the same way. What works for me is going to work for you. Nope, that's not the answer. So when I'm working with people that are ADHD, it's very specific for them because the way they deal with things is different than this person over here or that person over there. You've got to really allow them their individuality to see what their processes are, to see what helps move them forward.
Okay. So, you said you primarily work with business owners. Do you also work with them as far as beyond the business?
Yes, because what affects one area affects all areas. It's also what, like the saying goes, and I've heard this many times in the coaching industry, is what you do one way is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are doing this in your business life, how is that affecting your personal life? And if you can affect the business life to have that moving forward, there's going to be things in the personal life that there's going to have to be looked at. So you usually end up starting in this area over here because they're like, Shay, I need to be able to be more productive. I need to be able to get my deadlines. And as we go through those processes, we're looking over here in their personal life too, because we want to be able to have a whole interaction, not just, okay, when I'm in business, I'm this way. And then when I'm in my personal life, I'm this way. And, you know, that's how we do it. No, 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 no. You're different in each area, but why? And where, and how are you doing it in the business life versus personal life? Are you showing up in your business world and not in your personal world? Okay, what do we need to work on to create you to show up in both places? So it does bleed into each other.
So, really, and I'm taking a little bit of a liberty here, you're
Go
not
for
just
it.
a business coach. I hate the term work life balance because there is no such thing, but you help them achieve a work life harmony.
Yes, there is no balance in life. Let's be real. If we're working on a business, a lot of us are putting a lot of hours into that, right? And
Mhm.
if we're trying to do a business, somewhere else that time is being taken from. That's just reality. So if we're trying to gain a balance, which, that's not really what's going to happen, we need to create a flow that goes back and forth. So
Mhm.
maybe that you're blocking time for your business and saying, okay, from 9 to 5, I'm doing the business. Okay, so then you need to be really intentional about after 5 o'clock, you're done. After 5 o'clock, you're focusing in these other areas. So it's not so much, a lot of times we hear quality versus quantity of time. Well, the reality is that when you're a business owner, you've got a lot on your plate. You've got a lot to handle. You may even have employees, so now you've got the responsibility of taking care of that family too. So you've got to find a way of being able to ebb and flow. Okay. So if your business time is higher at this end, okay, well, then this is a little lower on this end, but we can switch that back and forth where it's just kind of like the up and down, like a seesaw. One time it's higher, one time it's lower. But it's being able to find the ways to really be intentional with it. For us that are neurodivergent, do we have, time management skills? Some do, some don't. Do we understand even what time is? Like if I said, hey, Deanna, can you be done in 5 minutes? Do you know what 5 minutes is? Because a lot of us don't. And so a lot of us learn the tips and techniques of how to gauge the time. If you're not used to knowing what 5 minutes is, put a timer on because then your body and your brain will start registering, oh, the timer went off. How long was that? Okay, that's 5 minutes. And so it's little things like that. A lot of people don't realize just implementing a small little thing can create a bigger outcome.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to show my quirkiness here, and I'm going to totally shift tracks on you. I
Sweet.
can see something that our listening audience can't, and we talked about this when we were getting to know each other. Please tell me about those wonderful bunnies.
Oh, my bunny's back here. Let me grab one. These bunnies are what I did to help me in my recovery from my concussion. And I have really enjoyed doing them because it settles my brain down. That's actually one way for me to kind of wind down for the day. I
Mhm.
know it sounds quirky because it's like, how can you be relaxing when you're doing something? Well, if my hands are busy, my mind settles. So if you struggle with relaxing, what works for you? A lot of people are like, go sit down and relax. I'm like, if you make me sit still, I'm going to lose my ever living mind. But if you give me something to do, right? If you give me something to do with my hands, then I'm totally fine. I'll sit down and watch a movie. I'll be able to talk and have a conversation. But that's again another process that you teach yourself to learn. So when I did the bunnies, I learned to be able to not only allow my brain to just rest, it was also a repetitive thing for my hands. So it's kind of like sitting in a rocking chair, when you
Right.
rock a baby, right? That's soothing, and the baby hopefully falls asleep if it's nap time.
So, for my listening audience, I know y'all can't see what we're talking about, but behind her, she has these handmade crocheted bunny rabbits that are absolutely adorable. They look like they are made with the softest yarn and they are so plushy. And a little birdie told me that from time to time they might be available for sale.
Yes, because as you make stuff, they kind of gather up in piles. And you end up having a lot more than you think because you can only give so many out to your family and friends. And so, yeah, some of them are, and I make varying sizes. So it's been really fun because you're right, they are the softest, sweetest yarn. It's velvet yarn. So if you've ever felt velvet, you know what soft is. And they are great. I have a lot of parents that like them when there's a little bit of weight to them. So I'll use two skeins of yarn, which makes them a little heavier. So it's kind of like a weighted bunny. And then we also have, I have some friends of mine that have autistic children, and they use them for comfort because of the softness to it. So it's kind of like I've met a lot of different, you know, areas for people with the bunny. So it's been fun being able to do that and serve others with them.
Well, they are adorable, and I'm a crocheter, and so I can see how much skill and how much time has gone into each of those, and they're just phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you. They're fun.
So tell me, Miss Shay,
Mhm.
do you have anything interesting coming up in the near future?
I currently am having a few podcasts that are dropping, and summits that I'm talking at, but I am working on trying to gather a program together to work with teens too, because I'm finding that our teens are really struggling, guys. They're really having a hard time because there's nobody in the schools to help them. And so I'm working on that as a new thing, but I'm also working on creating planners for us that don't want all that crazy stuff that people are putting in planners. So those are the two things that I've got going on. And I'm creating that. It's taking a little bit of time. You know how things go. We project it in our head to be a lot faster than it's going to be. But yeah, it's getting started. And I'm excited to see what happens with both of them, because I love working with teens as well as working with the parents because sometimes they just don't know how to communicate to each other. Because one's, not necessarily neurodivergent, they might be neurotypical and they just don't get it. So,
It does seem like when our sweet little innocent babies hit about 12 years old, they start speaking an alien language that we feel like we should remember, but for some reason we don't.
true, very true. And I will give you a little tidbit. Around that same age is when it's more average that girls are getting diagnosed as ADHD. So,
Absolutely.
that's a thought. Yeah.
Um, there used to be a fairly wide gender gap between diagnoses. They didn't think girls could be autistic, which I think is
Right.
hysterical. And we have finally proven to them that no, we're not. It's not that we're not autistic. We're just different than different.
Right. And it's been interesting. I had someone say to me just recently, like, well, isn't it just a fad that all the women are getting diagnosed now later in life? Everybody has ADHD. And I'm like, no, it's not a fad. It's just we were overlooked because some of the first diagnosis is anxiety and depression. They aren't looking past that to see what is the core issue that's causing the anxiety and the depression. And now they're realizing that they go hand in hand. So if they're having anxiety, is it possible? Instead, before they'd be like, no, you're just dealing with anxiety. And so it's been huge opening of the door and allowing women to be able to finally say, no, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. And I would appreciate you looking into it.
Yes, ma'am. No, I completely agree. I was fortunate enough to be diagnosed young, but I was only diagnosed because of traumatic brain injury from meningitis.
Oh, wow. See?
There were extenuating circumstances that caused them to.
Right. Exactly. That's the struggle that we're all having. I'll be honest. I'll be truthful. If I wouldn't have had the percussive concussion, I'm not sure I would have delved into as much as I have with ADHD, even with having kids with it and a husband with ADHD. I don't think I would have delved into it as far if I wouldn't have had my own experiences and my own struggles and people not realizing, you know what, there is something going on here. We need to really look at it. And being able to realize that when they first did the study for ADHD, you were right. They only studied the boys. And so, with us exhibiting it differently, women do not exhibit it the same as men. Girls do not exhibit it as the same as boys. We have a lot more of ours internal. A lot of ours is racing thoughts. A lot of ours is not the activity where we can't sit still, although there is a component to that too. Ours could be excessive talking, which, that is true for boys also. But for girls, we're also taught, be quiet, be polite, And boys are told, oh, boys will be boys. So there's a discrepancy in a lot of it. But now we're starting to kind of move that back into looking and saying, okay, let's really just look at the symptoms instead of saying, well, this is just what it is. And if you only have this, then you'll have ADHD. No, there's a lot more that goes into that.
Absolutely. I know you know this, but having raised as many children as you have, but if I were to set my 18-year-old son and my 15-year-old daughter side by side, they're not going to behave remotely the same, and yet they have the same diagnosis.
I know, isn't it fascinating how our brains can be so totally different and even in the same family and how they're different? It is that way with ours too, because some of them they're pacers, like they'll pace when they're trying to think, or their leg will be bouncing, or their foot will be bouncing because we have more boys in our family than we do girls. We only have two girls.
Oh,
And then there's seven boys. So there is a lot of that hyperactivity side of it within our family, except for my youngest. Now, my youngest is 18, and he is not one that's that hyperactive. He's more similar to what women deal with, of it's the racing thoughts, and it's the anxiety, and it's that depression and all the other things internal, not as much as the external symptoms that you see with, normally with boys. So it's interesting to see that crossover.
absolutely. Well, we are starting to run short on time. Do you have any last thoughts for the audience today?
I do. The first thing I want to say is you are not broken. Make sure you realize that your ADHD or your neurodivergence or whatever it is that you've had for a diagnosis does not become your identity, because that's not who you are. That's just a characteristic, what you deal with. So make sure you realize that you're not broken. You just have a different way to do things, and it's fabulous. And have fun with it. Find the gifts in it, because there is truly gifts within that neurodivergence.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. Tell my listeners how they can find you if they
Mm.
loved what they heard today.
They can find me at my website at totally forgot my website name. There we go. See, that's one of those ADHD things. There we go. winningthehumanrace.com/ADHD dash style. And there's actually a free opt-in that they can check for to be there, because I have a little quiz I'm going to actually be putting on there today that they can check in and see if their way of thinking is closer to that ADHD side or not, and a few tips that might help them. So I look forward to it.
Well, all of her contact information will also be associated to the blog post that you can find on kfred.com. You can also find this, and there went my ND, my brain totally locked up. You can also find this episode on YouTube and Facebook on Neurodivergent News. We've enjoyed having you today, Miss Shaye, and hopefully you will be able to come back and chat with us and give us an update in a few months on all the wonderful things going on in your life.
Thank you so much, Deanna. I look so forward to talking with you again. I so appreciate being here today.
Absolutely. All those out there in the K-Fred audience, have a glorious and wonderful day, and we will see you soon.
Now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. Oh, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. You got control of me, break my barricade walls are crumbling grounds. They shake, you came to save, but it's way too late. Every single time you stay, I cave. You got